Welcome back everybody, my name is Robert Doman, and in this video we're going to be talking about the indie dev plague destroying people for years. I keep seeing across YouTube, and it's perpetual development. It's the idea that people cannot release their projects, they can't release their games. I'm going to break down some comments and some questions to kind of help us get thinking about this problem and hopefully try and provide some alternate ways of thinking to heal you from this plague if you are struggling with it too. And to be honest, I suffered with this in the past, and it's a skill that has to be practiced. And even if you study game dev, it's all about practice, okay? You have to reflect on your own practices to see what is going wrong and to stop it from happening again. I have a few quotes here I have taken from other people's devlogs on YouTube. They're common things that I've seen over and over again, okay? So the first one is, I have overscoped my game, but this is the game I want to make. And what they're trying to say with this quote is that their vision for the game keeps growing. It won't take forever, but it might. But they wouldn't want it any other way, right? Because the game wouldn't be as good as it would be without all these extra ideas that they've come along with along the way. So to the game devs out there who have overscoped their game, but they are trying to stick with it because it's the game they want to make, I will ask them this question: what is overscoping? And they might say to me, overscoping means adding cool stuff to my game to make it bigger and better for mass audiences, so I can make my money back, so I can make money, so I can be a professional, so I can, do this for a living. And I would completely disagree. The scope of the game is the amount of work it takes to complete it. So this could be measured in hours or the amount of tasks you need to do. But overscoping is when the game's scope is larger than it is possible to complete in your desired time frame or with your budget. And it's usually caused by adding unnecessary things to the game or not planning it out correctly at the beginning. And in reality, we are all guilty of this because we often start a project with this dream in our mind that of a game or of a piece of artwork or a book, whatever project we're working on. Obviously in this case it's games that we would love to do and that we'd love to finish, and we start on it without fully thinking it through. And that means that once we've began, we start thinking of these extra things that we can add into the game to make it better in our own minds, because we haven't actually fully thought out what it is. And so it's very common because hobbyists and even professionals often don't take the time and effort or have the practice and experience to correctly predict the scope of the game at the beginning. It's hard to do. Even massive corporations making games get it wrong because you can't predict it until you have some information, right? And if you're making a sequel to a game, maybe you do know. But if you're going to add loads of other features, you can probably expect it to go wildly out of control. So it's pretty common, but to say I've overscoped it and want to continue, it's very difficult to get behind that. So what is scope creep? And if I was to ask this question to them, they might say it means that once you start a project, you can see how good it could be, and you want to make it that good. You want to make it bigger, and in order to make it better. But in reality, scope creep is the scope of the game getting bigger and bigger after development starts due to the addition of features not originally planned. And this leads to delays and often the abandonment of projects. That's the real issue with scope creep and overscoping, is that we end up chucking them in the bin. Scoping a game is incredibly important and can be helped by making small prototypes and documenting analysis before jumping into the full development of the game. So this includes calculating the total time needed on a project based on your current working speed. But that can be helpful, but it can also be deceiving because games can become very complex very quickly once you have multiple moving parts. What's ultimately necessary is often and regular reviews of the work you've done versus the predicted schedule that you set out in the beginning. And that will help you understand when roadblocks are occurring that you might not actually have picked up on yet, or you might just refuse to believe that it's true that you are overscoping your game and you're being held back by these complex things. So you should also consider cutting features rather than forcing them in to fit with the constant reworks. And that does sound hard, but I'll talk about the thinking behind that kind of stuff a bit later. My next question to this kind of comment of I've overscoped my game, but this is the game I want to make, is why does the game need to be overscoped? These developers, and me in the past as well, might come back to me and say, because this is my dream game, or because I don't want to make small games. I want to make big, amazing games. And I would say to that, the game being bigger with more features is often a sign of a badly designed game. The game may be unclear to the player as to what the focus should be. It also becomes harder to test or balance with more moving parts. A small focus game has just as much likelihood to be well received and sell well as any other. I would argue that a small, tight, well-executed game has a much larger likelihood to sell well than a ballooned, untested game full of mediocre content. And I'm sure you can agree with me on that you've played games that you had no idea what you're doing. You kept getting lost. It felt untested. It kept breaking. Versus a game that's very tight and small and beautiful. It's a piece of art. The way that you can feel the soul of the developer. The story is coming across to you very strong. That to me is more important in a game than it being a big game or a long game. Think of those kind of big, long games for bigger teams that have done research and have people to pay off and have microtransactions and other ways of monetizing their content that would be able to sustain large companies, right? Or that large companies would need for sustaining. You, on the other hand, don't need to worry about this massive world beyond your control. You don't need to have to manage multiplayer servers, for example. You can just start small. So yeah, features such as multiplayer are considered utterly necessary by some in order to make the game fun or sell any units. But if it doesn't fit the game and it doesn't fit your skills, it sounds like overscoping to me and will only hold you back from releasing. All of this video is really about the plague of not releasing your games. If you actually want to learn to release games, you need to start small and prove to yourself and your players that you can do it with a game which is basically, if we're talking about multiplayer, only multiplayer before working on a massive dream multiplayer game project. Because if you don't want to do your dream a disservice, you need to practice first. A rockstar doesn't go out on stage to 100,000 people and play his guitar for the first time, right? He's been playing for a long time. He knows exactly what he's doing, just like you need to do. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next comment now. So the first one was, I have overscoped my game, but this is the game I want to make. And you can hopefully already see that just by saying I've overscoped it, you're creating an issue for yourself. And so the next comment is, I have a plan and a list of things I want to implement, but I don't have a game design document. If I was to say something like this, and I probably have in the past, I would say that the vision for the game in my head is so strong, and I've written a list of things I need to do so I can get closer to finishing it, but I don't know why I'd need a game design document. And that's fair enough. Unless you studied game development, you might not understand why a GDD, a game design document, is important. And even if you have studied it, it can be time consuming, and you understand that the game changes as you test and you work agile. But that's no excuse, in my opinion. So what is a game design document? And if I was to ask this question to the person who said this comment, they might say, isn't it just for large professional teams, not solo developers like me whose design will change with prototyping and testing? And I would say, that sounds true. It does sound like a document is very solid, that you can't change it. However, I would say that a game design document is usually a digital file that can be easily accessed and updated, containing all information regarding the game, its setting, story, mechanics, influences, sketches. It can be anything you need it to be, simple or complicated. And the fact it's digital and can be easily accessed, just like Google Docs, you can see the revision, like every time it changes, and you can go in and change it very, very, very easily. So a game design document can be updated and move when you move. But the main thing is that you are answering the question, what is the game? What is its core? And how will what you make stay true to that core? So in the beginning, you had an idea for the game, had a vision. It could be after all of this overscoping we talked about earlier, that your vision has been lost. But because you keep adding stuff and you haven't written anything down, you don't see that. The ultimate purpose of a GDD, a game design document, is that you are storing information for you to come back to, or to show anyone else that you need to hire, or to pitch to. It helps legitimize your idea and show that you have fully considered what, why, and how you are doing it. And this is to yourself. You're legitimizing it to yourself as well. Sometimes GDDs include budgets and timelines, but it all depends on who's making it and why. So not all developers will need to add a budget stuff if they're just doing it on the weekends, but having a timeline, not understanding that you're not going to have time to work on it every single weekend, and then thinking about how long it takes for you to do one task, and then snowballing it up to work out how long it would take for you to finish an entire game. And I did this with Take It Racing 2, and at one point I calculated that it would take me 6 months of working every single day, 8 hours. And I said to myself, this isn't going to work. So I cut loads of content, and I realized that the game was super ballooned, and I cut it down, and I got it done, and I got it onto the Switch, and the rest is history. So not making a game design document could result in a game feeling a little higgledy-piggledy, with no concrete vision of what's actually being communicated to the player. So I definitely felt this with Take It Racing 2 before I realized how long it would take me. And I cut all that content that was completely unnecessary, that was actually making it difficult for new players to understand what the hell is going on. And even me as a tester to be like, well, how do I even get to that part of the game to test it? It just didn't make sense. And I'm sure there'll be parts of your own games and these games I'm watching on YouTube as well that are just unnecessary, completely unnecessary. That's why a GDD is so important. It crystallizes everything you have in your head, puts it on paper, makes it real, makes you have to think about how you're going to do something and why. The why is so important. So another question I have for somebody saying, I have a plan and a list of things I want to implement, but I don't have a game design document, is why is the vision in your head so important? And they might say, because it's my dream game. It would be so good to play. On top of that, they might say, I don't want to sacrifice my dreams, right? Which sounds like a very bold and strong thing to say. However, I would say that the idea in your head is just that. It is an idea. Just like the dream game will always be a dream. In reality, ideas and dreams are affected by things such as time, experience, and the numerous concepts, objects, and events happening constantly, intertwining with them and around us. So hyper-focusing on an idea or a dream will often lead us to disappointment if it's not properly considered, thought through, and tested regularly. You kind of need to have that reality check hit you and hit the game quite hard a lot of the time. And we want to bridge the gap between ideas/dreams and reality. So the vision in your head is important, but it's not as important as you think. It's only important if you are considering the real world interacting with it. If it's just a dream floating around, it cannot exist. You have to have it touch the ground. So another question I would have for somebody saying, I have a plan and a list of things I want to implement, but I don't have a game design document, I would say, what happens when the vision for the game in your head changes? And they might say, it won't change. And if it does, the game idea can only get better. And I would say to that, we are human and our minds are not infinite. Writing things down is incredibly important to process what we're thinking and document it for next time. We know this, and that's why we create to-do lists, as we talked about with the I've got a list of things to do. So we know we have to write stuff down, but we don't write down everything we think we do. We need to really think about why we're doing things, not just what to do. A game design document exists to not only document the idea, but why certain elements are so important, like I'm saying. Writing pillars to boil down the idea into what the game stands for will help you let you see the parts of your game that are unnecessary and needlessly overscoped. So the pillars. It's like, what does your game stand for? What can't the game exist without? And you can also see the opposite of that. So if your game is a driving game, if you can play the entire game walking, for example, you can get out your car and just walk around, and you never drive, is it a driving game anymore? And are you making the game you wanted to make by giving them the feature of exiting the car? So yeah, think about why certain things in your game need to exist, and make sure you're not going against those things just for the sake of adding features that you think will make the game bigger and better. And this is overscoping at its core. It is so easy to say no to something if you have a list of reasons why it doesn't suit your game and you have a tight timeline that you can't fit in anything new. So having this to-do list with no why and no dates on it, it's just an endless perpetual development. That's what we're trying to combat here. So having the why and cutting things that don't fit with that why and cutting things that you can't get done in a certain timeline, you will see your projects finally finish when you realize you can just add some polish to something and call it done. It's beautiful. It's so powerful. I know that it's like the quality in your head, it might not fit what you originally intended, but having something to your name is so much more powerful, and it will propel you forward. And everything you've just done is practicing those skills to make the next game even better. So another comment I'm seeing repeatedly from game dev YouTubers and just indie devs in general: I've started a new project because the one I'm working on is too big. This is the enemy of finishing, right? Of finishing your games, because the next project will likely follow a similar train to the last one if you don't properly analyze what went wrong on the last one. When they say, I start a new project because the one I'm working on is too big, in their head they're thinking, the current game has ballooned out of control and I'm considering it unfinishable right now. Maybe I need some extra skills, maybe I need some extra people on board to help me. And starting a new project means I can finish a game without sacrificing this one, because this game will be so good and cool, I can't bear to cut it and make it smaller. That's what I think they're thinking, and I know at one point I thought exactly the same thing. So I'd ask them, why will the new game be more likely to be finished? And they might say to me, because I won't overscope this time. But if I was asked, why will a new game be more likely to be finished? It won't be more likely to be finished. The fact that the current game that you are working on, that you're saying is so good and big and overscoped, is playable, and that you have big ideas for it, I would say it means it's going well. Surprisingly, I know that's a bit strange. You have this game that's so big and so good, it's like your baby. You don't want to cut it down and finish it. It actually means it's worth something to you. How about you make a copy of that game and then save that big project you had, the ideas for it, save it away. And with this fresh new game, you can cut it. You can do whatever you want with it, and you can make it small and finish it and get people to play it and get their feedback, and you even make a Kickstarter or a Patreon or whatever you need to do, a Steam page, and have people experience it, sell it, cut it down to whatever it needs to be to make that happen. Doesn't that sound great? The fact you like this project, you like it so much, you don't want to cut it down. Cut it down, get it down and finish it. That's a good thing. So again, to the comment, I started a new project because the one I'm working on is too big, I would say, why is the current game unfinishable? And they're saying to themselves, because it's taking a long time and I want to release more games. I want to make money or explore new ideas I'm having. This one's taking up all of my time. And I would say that the current game seems unfinishable because you're not practiced in finished games. You haven't planned to the end of the game experience, so you can't logically put a lid on the game. And you need to evaluate the current game experience to imagine it finished. You need to cut as much content as possible to make that happen if necessary, and you can always add other ideas to a sequel once you've had people play it. Game development is a job because we are sat down at a desk doing repetitive tasks a lot of the time, like programming, bug fixing, testing, pixel art, whatever. We are doing mindless tasks that can be boring, and if you do want to do this for a living or make more games, you have to practice like feeling that uncomfortability, knowing that you are working towards something in the end. And starting a new project every time it gets hard is not a very healthy way of thinking of yourself as a developer. You need to put the lid on games and get them out the door and have people play your work and enjoy your games. And if you want to release more games, you need to understand that cutting games that are getting big to make them small is a powerful skill. And there will be times when you won't need to cut. But right now, if you are struggling to finish the game and you're overscoping and you're on your own and it's feeling hard and you want to move on to another project, maybe your project is too big and you should scrap it. But that's from analyzing yourself and your work. You have to think more deeply, then I'll just put it on the shelf and start a new project. You need to ask yourselves these questions, these difficult questions. And finally, the last question I'd have for somebody saying, I started a new project, but because the one I'm working on is too big, is why don't you want to sacrifice the game, aka finish it? And they would say maybe, the game isn't that fun, but it will be when I add everything I want to add, so I'm shelving it. And I would say, as the developer, especially if you're solo, you are fun blind, okay? You know the experience inside out, so you are not a good arbiter of what is fun right now. And overscoping and ballooning the game with content won't help you believe otherwise. Consider conducting playtest sessions to see people's real reactions if you are truly worried. Otherwise, you might already understand that the game is ready to be finished. The likelihood is that the difficult tasks of bug fixing and balancing, finalizing the game, are difficult, but adding something new and testing it is easy and fun. And you need to get over that feeling of like just chasing fun constantly as a developer. See yourself as an artist that wants to hang their painting on the wall. You can't just see yourself as a kid playing in the sand and expecting this professional product to rise out of it. You have to make those difficult decisions and think about the why of your work. If you want it to ever be finished, if you want to get it out the door, if you want to be a developer, you have to finish developing. You have to finish games. And that's the plague. Don't get caught up in these ways of thinking, okay? That's all I have to say today. I have a load of other quotes that I've got from other people that I keep seeing around the place. So if you want me to make another one of these videos, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, what do you think of overscoping? Do you think there's a plague on us that is hard to overcome? Have you seen other developers' games fall to these issues? And what are some of your tips you'd give to these people if you think that you don't struggle with them, or do you struggle with them? I know I do. It's very human, I think, to have these things, especially with larger, complex things such as games. Let me know. And let me know if I helped. And I'll put my patrons up on screen right now. Thank you so much to you guys. You guys are the absolute best. Remember to like the video if you like the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Did you find this video useful? How would you rate yourself out of 10 as a game finisher? Are you skilled at finishing and knowing when to cut content? Or are you falling into these traps of overscoping, starting new projects, and just writing to-do lists? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.